September 27, 1942. Richmond, California. Kaiser Shipyards No. 2 San Francisco Bay. The air vibrates before dawn. Not with artillery but with steel. Rivet guns chatter like machine gun fire. Arc welders hiss and crackle, throwing blue light across fog-dampened hull plates. A Liberty ship's skeleton rises from the slipway, ribs exposed, steam curling from freshly welded seams. Somewhere a whistle blows. A shift change. No pause. On the catwalk above the hull, a foreman named Frank Delano, 43, former auto plant supervisor from Detroit, checks his stopwatch. He isn't timing men. He's timing a ship. Below him, a prefabricated midsection, already fitted with piping, bunks, and wiring, swings into place on a crane lowered with inch-perfect precision. The welders step in instantly, masks down, sparks flying. Frank feels a familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear. Pressure. Somewhere in the Atlantic, German U-boats are hunting convoys tonight. Every hour here is measured in lives out there. You can hear it in the yard, the urgency. The rhythm is mechanical, relentless, nothing like the old shipbuilding he once knew. No long months of hand-fitted plates. No master craftsman guarding trade secrets. This is something else entirely. This is Henry J. Kaiser's idea of war. Kaiser himself stands back from the noise, a heavy-set man in a plain coat, watching the cranes swing like metronomes. He is not a naval architect. He never served at sea. Before the war he built roads, dams, and hospitals, big things fast. The Hoover Dam. The Grand Coulee. Projects people said couldn't be finished on time. Now the U.S. Maritime Commission has given him a different problem. Ships are being sunk faster than they can be built. Since 1940, German U-boats have turned the Atlantic into a killing ground. Tankers burn off the East Coast. Cargo ships vanish with no warning. Britain is bleeding tonnage. America, newly at war, is rushing to fill the gap, but traditional shipyards can't keep up. A Liberty ship takes months to complete. Months the Allies don't have. Kaiser doesn't argue with naval tradition. He ignores it. Instead, he borrows from automobile assembly lines, from slaughterhouses, from dam construction. He breaks ships into modules, bow sections, stern sections, engine blocks, built simultaneously in different locations, then brought together like pieces of a giant steel kit. Welding replaces riveting wherever possible, faster and requiring fewer skilled hands. Training that once took years is compressed into weeks. Most radical of all, Kaiser hires anyone who can learn. In the yard below, Margaret O'Neill, 26, welds a vertical seam. 6 months ago, she worked as a waitress in Oakland. Now she wears steel-toed boots and a protective hood, her hands steady as molten. Metal fuses plate to plate. Around her, thousands like her. Women, farm boys, migrants from the Dust Bowl, do work once reserved for elite shipfitters. The old shipbuilders scoffed at first. They called it reckless. Unsafe. You can't rush the sea, they said. Kaiser doesn't answer. He posts production numbers. By mid-1942, his yards are launching ships faster than anyone thought possible. Weeks become days. The press begins to circle. The Navy watches closely. Skeptical admirals run stress tests on the hulls, waiting for failures that don't come. Then in November, Kaiser decides to make a point. On November 8, 1942, at Richmond, the keel of a Liberty ship named SS Robert E. Peary is laid down. The workforce is told to treat it like any other ship. No shortcuts. No stage tricks. Just efficiency. Stopwatches click. 4 days later, 4 days and 15 hours, the ship slides into the water, complete, see where the engine's installed. The yard erupts. Whistles scream. Workers cheer, some laughing, some crying, exhausted beyond words. Frank Delano looks at his stopwatch again, almost disbelieving. He knows what this means. If ships can be built like this, not once but repeatedly, then the math of the war changes. Across the ocean, German naval intelligence is already doing that math. In concrete bunkers along the French coast, U-boat commanders file reports. Sinkings remain high, but Allied convoys keep coming. Losses that once crippled supply lines are being replaced, sometimes before the wreckage has even settled on the seabed. A staff officer notes the trend bluntly. Allied shipbuilding capacity now exceeds U-boat destruction rates. It is not propaganda. It is arithmetic. Back in Richmond, Kaiser watches another hull take shape as dawn breaks over the bay. The yard does not sleep. Lights burn through the night. Shifts overlap. Cranes swing. Steel keeps moving. For the first time since the war began, the enemy's greatest weapon, attrition, feels suddenly outdated. The ocean is still dangerous. The U-boats are still out there. But here on this stretch of California shoreline, the balance is beginning to tilt, not with guns or torpedoes, but with stopwatches, welders, and an idea that speed itself can be a weapon. January 14, 1943. Berlin. Kriegsmarine Headquarters, Bendele Block. The room smells of cigarette smoke and damp wool. Maps cover the walls, blue pins for U-boat patrols, red grease pencil marks tracing convoy routes across the Atlantic. At the long table, Gross Admiral Karl Dönitz listens in silence as a junior intelligence officer finishes his report. The officer's voice is tight, controlled. He knows these numbers are dangerous. Sinkings for December, 600,000 tons, he says. A pause. Estimated Allied merchant ship construction for the same period, approximately 900,000 tons. No one speaks. Dönitz leans forward, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the map. For 3 years, his entire strategy has rested on a single premise, that Germany can sink ships faster than the Allies can replace them. It worked in 1940. It worked in 1941. Even in early 1942, the so-called Second Happy Time, U-boat commanders hunted almost without fear off the American coast. But now the lines don't add up. Another officer clears his throat and adds what everyone already knows. American production continues to increase, Herr Großadmiral. New shipyards, new methods. Dönitz exhales slowly. He doesn't need the name spoken aloud. Kaiser. The civilian builder with no naval pedigree. The man turning ships into consumables. Thousands of kilometers away, that consumable logic is visible in steel. February 3, 1943. Richmond, California. Kaiser Shipyards No. 3. Rain slicks the concrete. The bay is choppy gray under a low sky. Yet another Liberty ship stands ready at the ways, flags snapping in the wind. Workers line the railings, lunch pails in hand, faces smeared with grime. There is no brass band today. No speeches. Launches happen too often now for ceremony. A foreman raises his arm. The blocks are knocked away. The hull moves. Slow at first, then faster, until 38 feet of steel slides into the water with a thunderous splash. The ship rights herself, settles alive. Another hull already waits behind her, plates half-welded, cranes swinging overhead. Margaret O'Neill watches for a moment, then turns back to her station. Break is over. The next section is coming down. This is the true revolution Kaiser has unleashed, not the 5-day stunt ships but repeatability. The yards run like factories, with standardized parts, predictable workflows, and relentless scheduling. If one worker quits, another steps in. If a component is delayed, the line reroutes. Bottlenecks are studied, eliminated, redesigned. Kaiser's managers carry clipboards instead of blueprints. They track minutes. They track motion. They track fatigue. Shipbuilding becomes a science of throughput. And the output is staggering. By mid-1943, Liberty ships are launching at a rate of nearly 3 per day across American yards. Victory. Ships' faster, stronger successors are already entering production. Each one carries food, fuel, tanks, aircraft, ammunition. Each one means a convoy that can absorb losses and keep moving. On the Atlantic routes, the change is immediate and brutal for the hunters. March 18, 1943. North Atlantic. U-boat U-552, type WWII. Inside the pressure hull, the air is sour with diesel and sweat. Kapitänlieutenant Erich Top grips the periscope handles, eye pressed to the lens. Through the glass, a convoy stretches to the horizon, freighters in columns, escorts weaving like sheepdogs. He fires 2 torpedoes. One hits. A plume of smoke rises. Cheers erupt in the control room. But then the escorts react. Sonar pings hammer the hull. Depth charges roll in. Explosions slam the boat, lights flickering, gauges trembling. U-552 dives hard, slipping into the cold dark. When they finally surface hours later, the convoy is gone. Top logs the sinking. 1 ship. 1. Later, when intelligence summaries reach him, the frustration sharpens into something colder. Convoys are larger now. More escorts. More replacement ships. Sink 1 and another seems to appear on the horizon weeks later, sometimes days. Back in Germany, the reports pile up. U-boat losses climb. New Allied technologies, radar, Huffduff escort carriers compound the problem. But underlying it all is the same relentless fact. Even successful patrols no longer change the strategic balance. You can hear it in the language of German staff memos by late spring 1943. The confidence drains away, replaced by phrases like insufficient effect and enemy production superiority. For the first time, the Atlantic campaign feels unwinnable. May 1, 1943. Richmond, California. Henry Kaiser walks the yard with a group of Navy observers. One of them, a commander with salt gray hair, gestures toward a row of nearly finished hulls. "Do you ever worry," he asks, "that you're building them faster than we can crew them?" Kaiser smiles faintly. "That's a good problem to have." He stops near the ways, watching welders at work. "Ships are like bullets," he says. "You don't build one and admire it, you build millions and win the war." It's a blunt metaphor, but it fits. The yards are no longer responding to losses. They are overwhelming them. Across the Atlantic, Dönitz will later write that May 1943 marked the turning point, the month he was forced to pull his boats back, battered and bleeding, unable to stem the tide. That tide began here in places like Richmond, where civilian yards outpaced the enemy not with firepower, but with impossible engineering and an unforgiving clock. June 9, 1943. Washington, D.C. U.S. Navy Department Main Building. Ceiling fans hum in the heat as officers crowd around a long table stacked with charts. Merchant tonnage curves upward in thick pencil strokes. Sinkings, once jagged and terrifying, now flattened then dip. Rear Admiral Emory S. Land, head of the U.S. Maritime Commission, taps the paper with a knuckle. "This," he says, "is the first war we've ever fought where production is outrunning destruction." There is no cheering. Just a quiet, collective understanding of what that means. The Atlantic is not safe yet. Ships are still being sunk. Men are still drowning in black water. But the strategic lever has shifted. For every freighter lost, 2 more are already on the ways. For every convoy delayed, another sails. The enemy's chosen weapon, attrition, has lost its teeth. June 21, 1943. Richmond, California. Kaiser Shipyard's Training Hall. Rows of new hires sit on wooden benches. Some are barely out of high school. Others have gray in their hair. A Navy instructor points to a chalkboard diagram of a hull cross-section. "This weld," he says, "is not pretty. It doesn't need to be. It needs to hold." The lesson is short, practical, relentless. Kaiser's genius is not just speed, it is acceptance of imperfection. Liberty ships are not masterpieces. Their lines are boxy. Their engines are loud and inefficient. Some will crack in cold seas. But they are good enough, and there will always be another one behind them. Traditionalists hate this philosophy. Sailors sometimes complain about the ship's handling. Engineers note stress fractures. Kaiser listens, adjusts where necessary, but never slows the line. Because slowing down means death somewhere else. Outside, Margaret O'Neill finishes a weld and steps back, visor up. Her arms ache constantly now. The yard has taken its toll, burns, fatigue, the endless repetition. But she has stopped counting ships. There are too many. She remembers reading in the paper about a convoy that made it to Murmansk through ice and air attack. She wonders briefly if her welds were on one of those hulls. There is no way to know. And in a sense, it doesn't matter. The system no longer depends on any single ship or any single person. July 4, 1943. North Atlantic. Convoy HX-244. Fireworks are exploding somewhere far away on land, but out here the sea is calm, gray-blue under summer sky. A Liberty ship plows forward at 11 knots, escorted by destroyers and corvettes. Sailors lean on the rail, smoking, scanning the water. A sonar ping echoes faintly. Tension rises. The escorts tighten formation. Nothing happens. The convoy keeps moving. For months now, this has been the new normal. U-boats are still dangerous, but they are hunted as much as they hunt. Escort carriers launch aircraft at the first hint of contact. Radar sweeps the night. Huff-duff bearings triangulate radio transmissions. And always there are enough ships. The men aboard know the rumors. They've heard that in America, ships are being built in days. That there are yards where hulls line up like parked cars. It sounds like exaggeration. War stories. But as they look ahead and see freighter after freighter cutting the waves, the rumor feels very real. August 2, 1943. Berlin. Kriegsmarine Operations Room. The tone has changed. Reports no longer ask how to win the tonnage war. They ask how to survive it. An intelligence summary crosses Dönitz's desk. It cites American figures, numbers that would have been unthinkable in 1940. Over 18 million tons of merchant shipping produced in a single year. More planned. Dönitz closes the folder slowly. He knows now what his commanders in the Atlantic already feel in their bones. Even perfect tactics cannot overcome this scale. You cannot torpedo a factory. You cannot ambush an assembly line. September 14, 1943. Richmond, California. Launchways. Another ship slides into the bay. No applause. Just work. Henry Kaiser watches from a distance, older now, heavier but satisfied. He is not thinking about Dönitz or U-boats or strategy. He is thinking about flow rates, material shortages, training schedules. The war has turned into an equation, and for the first time it is an equation the Allies cannot lose. The Atlantic will still claim lives, but it will never again decide the war. Because somewhere behind every convoy, unseen and unstoppable, is a civilian shipyard that learned how to build faster than the enemy could destroy. December 26, 1943. Portland, Oregon. Kaiser Shipyard's Swan Island. Cold rain lashes the Willamette River as floodlights cut through the darkness. It is past midnight, yet the yard is awake, cranes moving, welders working, trucks rolling in with prefabricated sections. A Victory ship's bow towers over the slipway, taller and sleeker than the old Liberties, her lines refined by hard lessons learned at sea. A young Navy Lieutenant, James Holloway, pulls his coat tighter and watches the work. He has been sent west to observe production for an upcoming operation that officially does not exist. On paper, it is labeled only as future large-scale amphibious requirements. Everyone knows what that means. Europe is waiting. The Victory ships are Kaiser's next evolution. Faster, stronger, designed to carry heavier loads at higher speeds. They are harder targets for submarines and more flexible for the demands ahead. And like the Liberties before them, they are built with the same ruthless efficiency. Holloway flips through his notebook. Hull sections completed inland. Engines installed before launch. Crews training before the ship even touches water. Every delay anticipated, every motion studied. This is not just shipbuilding anymore. It is logistics weaponized. January 15, 1944. London. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. Maps of France cover the walls. Red arrows point toward Normandy's beaches. General Dwight D. Eisenhower stands with his planners, listening as supply officers speak in numbers instead of rhetoric. Tonnage available exceeds projected requirements, one officer says. Even with conservative loss estimates. Eisenhower nods slowly. He has commanded men in combat. He knows courage, planning, and luck all matter, but he also understands something simpler. An invasion starves without ships. Every tank that will roll off a landing craft. Every truck that will carry ammunition inland. Every ration, every drop of fuel, all of it depends on hulls that can cross the ocean again and again. Those hulls are already being built. March 3, 1944. Atlantic Crossing. SS John W. Brown. The Liberty ship rides low in the water, holds packed tight. Trucks are lashed to the deck. Crates fill every corner below. The engines thrum steadily, a sound the crew has learned to trust. A sailor named Thomas Reed, 19, leans against the rail at dusk. He's heard stories about how fast these ships were built. Someone said 4 days. Someone else said 5. He tries to imagine it and fails. To him, the ship feels solid, heavy, permanent. That is the final irony of Kaiser's work. Ships meant to be expendable do not feel expendable at all when you live inside them. April 10, 1944. Kiel, Germany. Naval Construction Office. A German engineer stares at production reports with a kind of numb resignation. New U-boat designs, Type 21 electro boats, promise higher speed and greater endurance. On paper they are impressive. Revolutionary even. But they are late. Factories are bombed. Materials are scarce. Crews are untrained. And even if the boats arrive in numbers, the Atlantic has changed. The enemy does not need perfection. He needs volume. And volume is something Germany can no longer match. May 28, 1944. English Channel. Convoys gather in numbers never seen before. Lines of ships stretch from horizon to horizon. Liberties, Victories, tankers, troop transports. The sea itself seems crowded. British sailors stare in disbelief. American officers do the math again just to be sure. There are enough ships. Enough to land an army. Enough to sustain it. Enough to replace losses and keep going. All of it rests on a simple, brutal truth forged thousands of miles away in civilian yards. The Allies can't afford to lose ships now. The enemy cannot afford to sink them. June 6, 1944. Normandy coast, France. As dawn breaks, landing craft surge forward. Behind them, the anchored mass of the invasion fleet fills the sea. Some of those hulls were built in record time. Some by workers who had never seen the ocean before the war. Steel meets surf. Ramps drop. History moves ashore. And far from the gunfire, back in places like Richmond and Portland, the yards keep working. Because even on the day of victory's opening act, the war is not finished and ships are still needed.